Hello and welcome back, and today's a slightly strange video where I would like to talk to you. More precisely, I'd like to talk to 20 of you. Recently I made a couple of videos on the subject of enshittification in NAS and on, if you're a Turnkey NAS user, migrating over to TrueNAS or UGREEN. It's two videos that are playing on the side of the screen next to me, and there was pretty good engagement on those videos, I'll be honest, and plenty of comments. Always recommended, good for the YouTube algorithm. But there was something of a trend in the comments, and that was quite a lot of DIY NAS users, either they are TrueNAS or UGREEN or just build your own with other operating systems, who kind of kept highlighting the same point in one form or another, and it was that people that go for turnkey NAS solutions and they're silly, they're idiots, they're doing it for you morons, just build your own, that kind of stuff. And there was a really, I would argue, negative trend in the comments, whether it came from tech elitism or it came down to just simply not quite understanding that there isn't one key for every single lock in the world. Now, before we get into the weeds, let's be realistic. DIY NAS is great. Building your own is great. It's a hell of a hobby. It can be fun. It's incredibly cost effective. If you're going to use things like LLMs and AI, it's even easier to build one these days. And there are plenty of different NAS operating systems in the market right now. This video is not to denigrate the subject of build your own or DIY. It is great. I just don't like the idea of DIY and build your own NAS for some reason being considered elite and just the only option in the field. That is the equivalent of saying, what you got an espresso coffee machine for? Just get a kettle, you FNC. It's not that simple. Not all solutions are for everyone. So I asked Ed to go through those two videos, the UGREEN and TrueNAS video and my NAS enshittification video. By the way, all of those comments, it's like 700-800 comments. Only one person called me out on spelling enshittification wrong. Figure. Anyway, in there, I asked Ed to go through and crawl me some comments that kind of were, in my opinion, kind of throwing shade unnecessarily at Turnkey NAS users. And I asked him to send them to me, which he did 5 minutes ago. However, of these comments, there's actually 20 comments. I thought there'd be like 5. So I'm going to go through all 20 comments, but I'm also going to go through comment 21 because this one I asked Ed to send me because this was the one that was the catalyst for this video. So again, I'll read it aloud here as I'm going to do with all of the comments. This is David Barnes. Okay, so you're pretty frustrated. You know you can build your own, right? Any old PC with a few cores and a gigabit connection can easily be converted into a Linux NAS and configured exactly how you want it. So you want to buy a turnkey solution that isn't perfect, or you can build your own. Now, again, that to me was quite triggering because realistically, I'm not saying there isn't truth in it. Getting a turnkey NAS solution, like a lot of different things, there's compromise. Are you telling me when you buy a DIY kit, you're buying your CPU and RAM, there isn't an element of compromise in 2026? And calling a turnkey NAS solution compromise without at least highlighting that DIY is not inherently without elements of compromise is kind of the problem here. So let's go through these comments, and no doubt by the end of this video, we'll probably have a much smaller channel. I'll have to close doors. So let's go, and Ed has handily numbered these, so I'm just going to go with DIY comment 1. Hopefully these are on screen. From GuyTech7310, simple solution, use TrueNAS and build your own system to your specs. Again, in an ideal world, I completely agree. Simple solution, simple is getting a bit of a bad back. I feel like we're going to come back to that later. Using TrueNAS and building your own system to spec is convenient, but I don't think we would call that simple unless you've done it before. And yes, it can get simple and you can use LLMs and lots of guidance services to do it, but for some people, they value their time. And for some people, the simple option is to just buy turnkey. But again, I see what you're saying there, mate, but again, I think there's a little bit more to that comment. Next up, comment 2. This is Indie B. Tell the NAS manufacturers to F off by building your own. No longer rocket science. Again, I think there is some truth in that comment. I would say the more NAS, DIY NAS manufacturers see, or NAS vendors, let's call them in this case, see people building their own, I think a lot of the time that doesn't scare them that much because building your own NAS has never really put them off that much. Yes, economic climate's definitely changed things, but I wouldn't say that brands like Synology, QNAP, etc. look at DIY NAS in the way we conventionally think of it and then get worried. However, they are worried about the glut of OS-free ready-made NAS solutions in the market. Loads of these solutions that roll out with no operating system that are just ready for Zimmer, ready for TrueNAS, ready for Unraid, ready for FIGO, ready for Open Media Vault, ready for the lot. That, I would say, is what is going to scare off NAS manufacturers. Next up, comment 3. From Cheetah 10K 16E, Cheetah hard drives, used a Dell server, just Dell servers, just saying. Again, great option. You can go on the likes of eBay and there are Dell used servers all over the gaff. The only caveat I would add on there is, much like the earlier comment about compromise, Dell servers, if you are doing a second-hand Dell server on eBay or Facebook Marketplace, I don't know your life, if you're going to use that, we come back to compromise again, because some of those are painfully inefficient. Some of them, notwithstanding just the CPUs, these things are built for much grander use. And if you're not going to use them to that grand use, or you go for some of those systems that use 300 or 600 gig 10K drives, again, like those cheaters and stuff I just mentioned, a lot of these Dell servers are not that efficient. Yes, they're built for 24/7. You're absolutely right. But comparing them to like a Turnkey Synology or a QNAP or even a UGREEN is incomparable. And yes, you can scale these things. You can go into BIOS, you can play with them. But a lot of them are using a lot older controllers that are less built for efficiency. Yes, robust and rugged. But a lot of the components, I'm not saying they aren't efficient. I am saying that a lot of them, when they were built a decade, 15 years ago, I've seen some Dell servers on eBay like 2012, stuff like that, are nowhere near as efficient as they are now. And by efficient, I mean the amount of power being used to get the job done, but also the base level power consumption when the things are sitting in idle for that 99% of the day they're not being utilized. Next up, let's crack straight on. Comment 4, Phantom 8. My NAS has always been a retired 2U server. Never understood the whole NAS craze. Again, banger. I agree. I totally get it. I, for the longest time, never understood NAS. For the majority, I would argue, of the late noughties and early 10s, very early 10s, I didn't really get it. I understood it. I know that NAS existed, but I wasn't in that frame of mind and I wasn't as familiar as I am now with just how many people were intimidated by the subject of locally hosted storage. This isn't just home lab, and this isn't running a bunch of Docker containers. I'm talking about the sheer level of anxiety some people had about moving away from friggin' Dropbox onto their own WD MyCloud. We take for granted that level of knowledge. So yeah, I completely understand when there are people that didn't understand it or didn't really buy in to it. But then the longer time I spent working in retail and data storage, the clearer it became to me that there was definitely a need for that, something we covered in the 200K video. Next up. This is from Bazdafigaware. I've mispronounced that, but I don't think you've done it right in the first place. Please, if that is your comment, tell me I pronounced it right. At the end of the day, it's just an x86 computer with some software. Again, true. But you can use that to describe so many things. And just because a fridge that someone can run Doom on, which apparently is a thing, is technically using a CPU and a RAM, although likely an ARM processor or a SoC at the very least, I think we can't just boil down a NAS to just an x86 chip on a board. These things are designed for certain deployments, designed for efficiency there once again. And although, yes, you're paying a premium for that, I don't think we can just say that a second-hand laptop that we've got some old Acer thing or a Mac Mini that we're going to run Plex on, which can be, by the way, better for a lot of users for running Plex. At the same time as that, we can't compare the two things because they are targeted and geared towards different deployments. And when they are used in those different deployments, it then bores out better efficiency. Next up. What have we got? Comment 6. Oh, we're getting on, aren't we? From Real Ivan Jinx. All you need is a few hard drives and a Linux machine. I don't know why it has sent that comment because although it is true, again, that is correct. If you do want to build a NAS, a Linux machine is kind of playing the form there when you've also got to include an OS drive unless it's unraid, or you're going to need your RAM there, but you're right, as long as it's a complete Linux machine and a few hard drives, again, you're going to have to make sure you can solder them in or get a USB dock. It's a little bit more layered than this comment suggests, but I understand the point. I'm being very, very pernickety there. But again, yes, there is all of that hardware. You can just get that hardware and boom, you've got a NAS, technically, but there's a lot of setup, there's a lot of knowledge, setting it up with the KVM in the beginning there, going through, sitting on the floor with a Linux machine if you're buying it in components, or you're repurposing old hardware and having to go in and change the boot disk. And I think there's a lot of knowledge that we take for granted, that we've just acquired, that we've just organically gathered. What we consider the base level, for some people, is the ceiling. And I think we really sometimes lose sight of that in tech. Next up, let's move along. I wonder how many subscribers I'm losing in this video. We'll find out later. Next up, from Mine00. People need to just buy old PCs and jam drives in. Please don't jam drives in. Underclock and you're set. What's a first gen i5 worth? $50? Which gen of i5 for a start? Because there's plenty of 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th gen i5s knocking around at the moment. Again, comes back to that word efficiency. But again, I get what you pay for is a very generalized term, but I do think there is merit in that. And I think a lot of the time you buy an old PC, scaling out the storage, being able to have stable pathways to the connected storage, and indeed the scalability of your storage there as well as having the time, energy, and just the space to kit it out and run it 24/7 is not going to be the same for everyone's mileage. And for some users, space is going to be limited. Power consumption is going to be limited. Their demand is going to be limited. And having a 2015 or 2018 i5 might sound good, or like buying an old QNAP from the past can work out, but running that in 2026 isn't going to be as power efficient. Again, some CPUs are flawed as well. We have to factor that in. It's not a hard and fast rule. I just think one glowing trend I've seen in a lot of the criticism of Turnkey NAS solutions seems to rapidly ignore the subject of efficiency. And again, as I said in the intro, DIY NAS is fantastic. And there are loads of ways to get efficiency in DIY and still save money compared with Turnkey. But you have to spend more time. You have to spend a little bit more research. And if that's your bag, that's great, but it's not going to be for everyone. Next up, just having a bit of a tea break, we'll go in and we have Lawrence Manning. Never used an off-the-shelf product. Build your own. It's not hard. You'll learn some Linux at the same time. Again, I think there's definitely some virtue in what you're saying there, Lawrence. But I will add that there are just some users out there that, they just want to take the easier route. And yes, they'll have to pay a premium for that. And there is an argument for, just like in the Enshittification video, definitely an argument that you're missing out on some things and you might have your wings clipped a little bit. And I think some people have weighed that up in their purchasing decision. Also, I will highlight with the whole learning Linux at the same time, most of the command line that I know has come from dealing with NAS. But there's a reason I have this big mat over here and another one at the studio, because I can't remember every single one of these. And I keep a Word doc over there, but not all of them. And yes, there is some etymology and some root to a lot of Linux commands, but not all of this I can store in my brain. And eventually you start looking stuff up. And unfortunately, I think some of us are just as guilty that we've started using LLMs. We started using some AI features to pull requisite command or getting it to look at some code to find a weakness. Again, is whether you think of that as using a skill rather than using it to make generative content there. I think there's an argument back and forth. But I think the point I'm making is that a lot of people are looking for an easier route and an easier life. We get one go at this life. My wife's car broke down recently and I had to stand around while a repairman started fixing it, and he was telling me everything he was doing, and he was saying how, most people, if they spent a bit more time learning how to fix their car and learning how to do certain things, they'd get the job done and they'd learn a bit of mechanic at the same time. And there is virtue in that. But I also know that there's only a finite amount of time in every day. And I think there are definitely going to be some users out there that one of the main reasons they got a NAS is because they specifically didn't want to learn some Linux command. They didn't want to learn some DIY because maybe they're a photo video editor. Maybe they're a data storage consultant that is focusing more on data than on the base, which I wouldn't argue is a great idea. But apropos of that, I just think there are definitely users out there that the idea of learning some Linux code along the way is actually enough of a put-off for them to buy a Turnkey NAS. And I know you're not going to be a fan of those people, but let's crack straight on with our next cue. Let's move that down there. What we've got? Comment 9 from Wow Indestructible. Okay, excellent. Fantastic picture there, by the way. Just a point of order, not a criticism. It's spelled Enshittification. It's 2 T's, so says the guy who invented the term. That's right. That was the person that called me out on it. Thank you, Ed, for including that and making me look like a tit. Next up, comment 10. Shawnees, I'm going to say. I know Sean's got different spellings. Why would anyone who actually wants something more than basic file shares buy a NAS, buy a mini PC and any USB enclosure? I think I've covered it already, but I'll say it again. Simplicity. Because you're right, basic file shares, one of the things I would say that is one layer above basic file shares that loads of people that buy a NAS want, it's easy backups. And you can say that counts as file shares, but file shares is a pretty nebulous term. But I can imagine people that buy Synology for active backup for business, for hyper backup, people that buy QNAP for hybrid backup sync, people that buy some multimedia focused NAS devices that have native video streaming appliances that are comparable to that of Plex, or people that want to use Plex or Jellyfin, people that want to use Kodi and DLNA media streaming there. There's loads of people that buy a Turnkey NAS solution for more than just file services. A lot of people buy it for some of those other things that are now considered base minimums. Hell, I went through this in a recent video and while on the phone to someone yesterday during an install, and they were using the NAS and it was all set up, but the one thing they weren't aware of is there wasn't a lovely, pretty file manager GUI for them to go into there. And I had to walk them through how to install it within TrueNAS to get that with the File Explorer, thanks to that in the Community Edition being pretty much standard. The base level of why people buy a NAS, I would argue, isn't just file sharing anymore. But let's crack on. What was that? Comment 10. We're at the halfway point, everyone. Zachary Sandberg. Good God, that is a good name. Apropos of whatever I've not read the comment yet, but that is a solid name. Consumer NAS solutions have been hot trash forever. An old PC, a used 10 gig NIC and ZFS is practically enterprise class. And again, there's a market. I'm not going to completely argue with you. Certainly, depending on which kind of old PC you buy, and we've already covered the point about power efficiency, I might add, there's definitely an argument to be made there. But I wouldn't say consumer NAS is trash. I really wouldn't. The number of times I've heard people refer to Android phones as trash by iPhone users, because iPhone users think there is only one path. And I'm sorry to compare you to an iPhone or an Android debate there, but I do think calling a NAS hot trash, but buying an old PC, a used 10 gig NIC and ZFS on top of that is not in some ways a bit sketchy as well. I think we maybe might not agree on that one completely. But again, solid name, mate. Solid name. Next up, Blue Screen. Oh, damning. It's your own fault for not DIYing. Well, there you go. If we're going to say that the reason for NAS enshittification is because people didn't pursue NAS DIY, have you looked out the window at 2026, RAM, SSD? A lot of that is to do with AI, and I think that is hurting NAS DIYers, if not as much, then pretty close to how much it is hurting Turnkey NAS solutions there. Next up, what is it? Comment number 13. Oh, I already responded to this one. Oh, okay. Mosscat. I'm new to the channel, but it's like a Lewis Rossman video, except Rossman sounds like he might explode any second when you sound more like you might break out in tears out of desperation. You, sir, nailed it. I actually sent this to some other people on YouTube when I saw that. Thanks for including that one, Ed. I totally don't feel like a tit based on that. Comment 14. This is why you should build your NAS/file server yourself instead. It is always cheaper, even back in the day, and extremely expandable and configurable. For the most part, I agree. I would say the lines have been significantly blurred. I would argue there are some NAS solutions from 2022 to 2024 that, in terms of RAM, certainly, have actually started appearing very affordably, whether that is you're going to go second-hand or new. Anything made after 2024, and especially Synology have done this, the prices have gone up so exponentially that, yes, trying to build from scratch actually does turn out cheaper. But when you look at some of the NAS solutions that rocked out 2023, 2020 to 2022 to 2024, some of them are actually pretty affordable now, and the price increase on them hasn't been hugely absorbent over time. They've not increased the price because of the automated buy and sell metrics there. But you've got to get in there quick to get hold of those ones. And this goes back, by the way, to people that are buying those old HP servers there. But this is actually turnkey NAS solutions that you can get. They're actually still pretty passable. Not as efficient in some cases, but still. And in terms of expandability and configurability, I would say that, again, depending on the base level hardware you choose to use for a DIY NAS solution, the expandability and configurability does come with its own overhead, its own glass ceiling, but of course you can remove those drives, that SSD, and pop it in a larger enclosure a lot more smooth than you can with a locked-in turnkey NAS solution. But I don't think it is quite as straightforward as it's way more expandable and configurable. I think there is a bit more flexibility to that, but we'll see. Next up, comment 15. This is from Rain2008, who I'm going to choose his name and himself after the purple Mortal Kombat character, and I shan't hear any different. Why don't you make a NAS yourself? It's easy and cheap. Easy? I think it's not as hard as it used to be. I do think making a NAS yourself, for some, is not going to be easy. I think it's easy. Download an ISO, burn it onto a USB with Blanch Etcher or Rufus, stick it in, KVM, install from the USB, install the software, boot it up, it appears on, or reboot appears on the LAN, make sure you've switched over to the USB. Fine. To me, that sounds easy. It sounds straightforward to me. But there are loads of people that summary that took me 6 seconds will take them a day or so, and they won't know, and particularly this also goes up, by the way, if they build the PC from scratch. We have all, if you're watching this, I am sure we have all sat there on the floor in our boxers crying at 2 a.m. because the PC will not boot. The red light is there, you're losing your desperation, you're trying not to bend the CPU pin as you have now removed it again, just to double check that you didn't bend one in the first place. You are double checking that the RAM is definitely sitting in that SODIMM slot and not slightly out of alignment. And you're making sure that every single pin plug of that PSU has gone in and that the SATA connectors are going there appropriately and you don't have wires crossed over the top and that the M.2 has safely gone into the M.2 slot and secured in. There are so many layers that we take for granted in PC building alone, notwithstanding extending it into the world of NAS, that we just can't call DIY NAS easy. I'm sorry, we just can't. We can say it's easier than it was, but it's not easy. Next up, let's crack on before Rain gets really annoyed at me for that. Let's go into the next one. Comment 16. Kyle James, I'm sorry if I butchered your name. Consumer is mad, his products are locked down, but it's not his fault for consuming. You idiots will learn one day. Genuinely, you could extend that to pretty much any appliance in our homes. You could apply that to tellies, you could apply that into any of the hardware that's released in the last 5, maybe even 10 years, where we are getting less for our money. And definitely now we're starting to see a great example. From my brother recently, I got him an Amazon Fire Stick because he just wanted to access my Jellyfin server, and he also wanted to just access Netflix and stuff. And we were looking at the more recent releases in Amazon Fire TV, and we'd worked out with these Fire Sticks, not only had the hardware got less and less and less and less with every iteration of Amazon Fire Stick, but on top of that, the newer generation runs actually run on a wholly different operating system that by its very design is designed to use less hardware and be more limited in its scope and ability. And the Fire Stick costs more with inflation and in general price than any of the previous generations. The point that consumers products are getting locked down is not extended to just NAS. It is a more general concept, I would argue, is affecting everything. And certainly now we're starting to see more and more hardware scaling back on RAM, scaling back on storage overall. This is a fact that is only going to get worse. I'm not arguing with you, Kyle or Carl James. It's just a simple fact, though. Next up, comment 17. My unpopular take. NAS is itself an enshittification. Back in the day, we had cheap mini boards and it was easy to make a NAS. And then NAS industry started seeping in. I still think that NAS and DIY NAS, if we're referring to just the term NAS as DIY or Turnkey NAS, I would argue there is still cheap motherboards now. There is still, or cheaper motherboard. Look at CWWK. Look at a lot of those options out there right now. And I don't think NAS in itself is enshittification any more than a car that drives automatic is the enshittification of manual gears. I think the hardware and the derivations of different kinds of hardware can generally serve a purpose. No company is going to make something if there isn't demand. Now, I counter that point ever so slightly by saying that some companies create the demand, they enshittify their product, or create a market that will accept an enshittified product. But I think NAS, we can't say in itself is enshittification of DIY because servers of one shape or form have existed for decades. We could go up to your NetApps, your EMC and your Dell, or we could go down to your WD, MyCloud, or hard drive in an enclosure that just happens to appear on the LAN over FTP. NAS isn't in itself an enshittification. It is a revision of something that has already existed where there was definitely a demand in the first place. But that's just my opinion. That's your opinion. Let's crack on. Comment 18. The light is at the end of the tunnel. Red Knight 535, solid username. Build your own. TrueNAS is not hard to learn as a newcomer. Are you essing me? The number of people I used to tell that Unraid was easy, or that TrueNAS Scale, now Community Edition, is easier than it was. And then these people would use it. These are people, base level, have been using Windows or using Mac their whole life. They've just been using those. And I handed them TrueNAS and they were angry at me. They were annoyed at me because I said it was easy, because I took for granted that base level knowledge that we have accrued over time. And I don't think we can say that TrueNAS is not too hard to learn without at least acknowledging the sheer base level of experience we've had in this field. And I don't think we should pull some kind of tech elitism where we are basically telling people that didn't build their own PC, that didn't do anything more than boot Windows Vista once. We can't say to them, learn TrueNAS, it's not that hard. There are so many layers of acquired knowledge there that we are choosing to ignore, and I don't think it's fair on us like eyebrowing these poor souls that are choosing between a turnkey NAS solution or DIY and basically shaming them into the more complicated solution that, yeah, sure, they'll learn some command line, but maybe their time possibly could have been spent better elsewhere. But again, different strokes for different folks. Next up. Been very repetitious, this video. I'm sorry. We're just going through these comments together. Can't wait to read the comments on this one. Next up, Toxiriel. I'm going to have a run at that. Hang on. Toxiriel. Did I get it right? Tell me below. These things were always a waste of money compared to build your own. Disagree fundamentally. I am sure there are different devices in our homes, in our businesses, that someone making their own DIY equivalent or patching something together as an alternate haven't once said, those things are a waste of money, you should build your own. I reckon that sentence has been used in different ways, in different folks over the years, that I think it's not fair, again, to refer to an industry that has gone on for that long and call it a waste of time. I bet there are users, and I should have mentioned this earlier actually, maybe this video should have been scripted. Oh well, look at the time bar. I reckon there are users out there that have used exclusively cloud services their whole life. They've been using it since college or uni. They went from a Dropbox into a Google Drive into something bigger for work and never looked back. And I reckon they look at turnkey NAS solutions and look at DIY and go, are you kidding me? How much time do you have? Now, I'm not one of those people. Lord, no. Hate it. I want my data under my roof. But we have to at least acknowledge that these devices for DIY NAS or for Turnkey NAS have existed for a reason and for that demand. And saying they're a waste of money, I'm sorry, man whose name, or woman whose name I can't pronounce, I'm pretty sure there is a whole bunch of cloud users that would say exactly the same thing about building your own in terms of how much time and money is worth. But again, I'm not one of those people, so I can't really speak for them. Finally, comment 20, which looks like a chunky one. Let's go into it now. Leo Kira 997. I've never understood the point of these. All a NAS needs to be is an old computer you don't use anymore with a hard drive or two. I'm using my friend's old computer he gave me, which is an FM2 based system. Whoa, old. Swapping out the case and slapped a few 8TB Seagate Iron Wolf drives into it. I was using Open Media Vault originally, but now I'm using Arch. My only problem is I don't have any other use for it besides Jellyfin. Can't find anything interesting. That's cool. And that is hardware recycling. That is double cool. Although I would argue, I bet someone in the comments saw the word Iron Wolf drives there and went, what a waste of money, you're getting conned, just buy normal drives. But still nonetheless, I can't find really any fault with that, because you've hardware recycled, you've realised your limit on what you want to do, you've even cycled through different bits of DIY NAS. I'm going to say after this video, I'm going to pull Ed to one side and ask him why that comment, let alone that comment is the last comment, is in the video. Because I think that's fine. They don't understand the point of a NAS. And it makes sense to them because they've realised very early doors what their demand is. And therefore they went, why do I need this device that does a bunch of things smoothly when I really do have this smooth path there? So fair play, Leo Kara 997. I actually agree with the majority of things you said there. I personally don't 100% have the same point of view you have about the point of Turnkey NAS solutions, but you're not out and out saying they're a waste of space, and that's fine by me. But ultimately, regardless of how much we are now going to argue in the comments, please God keep it civil, I think we can all agree that there are different devices for different people. They ain't perfect, from a DIY server to buying some Synology NAS, which, let's face it, has lost some of its luster over recent years. But nonetheless, there is a reason people keep buying those solutions. There is a reason that people still invest in TrueNAS, in Unraid. And there is still a huge reason why there are communities full of people on TrueNAS and Unraid, and we talked about this in the comparison video, that will help other users for the love of the game, the enthusiasts. And as long as that exists, then we can always be happy. But we can't browbeat Turnkey NAS. We can't say what a waste of time this sub-industry is. Because, as I mentioned in that 200k video, and the whole reason I compared TrueNAS and Unraid, the number of users over the years that subbed to the channel at the beginning, but also people I have met that started on a Mac power 2-bay USB device that then went into a network device, that went into a Synology NAS, from a QNAP NAS into a Turnkey NAS, that went with a WD MyCloud system, and then scaled up, and then they learned, and they understood, and they got enthusiastic, and these days they might be on a lovely little garage mounted, rack mount TrueNAS server that is cooking, and that's great. But we can't say, while we're at the top of the ladder, at the people at the bottom, losers. It's just not fair. But let's discuss / debate this in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. And please, I said at the beginning, and I'll say it again, this was not to denigrate or to attack or to fundamentally say are flawed any of the comments I've covered in today's video. Ed selected them, but they've been some great ones so far. I'd love to know the ones that he didn't put in the top 20. But these are all opinions, and I personally still love DIY NAS. I love DIY, but I love Turnkey as well. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Have a great weekend, everyone.